Okay, folks, this is Ray at Race Thunder Garage, and we're on the 55 T-Bird. We got part of the front end taken apart because we're going to take the steering box out. But this car is also going to get AC, so a lot of these components have already been taken off. I'm joined with my right-hand man here, Scotty, who gave up a pretty lucrative gig on the Starship Enterprise. But he and Kirk couldn't get along, so now he's working for Race Thunder Garage. Anyway, I'll give you the blow-by-blow as we go through this process. See you later. Okay, we're back under the car, and I wanted to point something out to you guys. This is obviously your pitman arm, and it attaches right down here to this stem. And this car at one time had power steering on it. This is your power valve. It's a hydraulic component. And it's got a shuttle valve right here that diverts hydraulic fluid to a ram that would be back up in here somewhere that would give you power assist. Well, the owner took all that stuff off, but he left this, he left the power valve on, which gives you a lot of slop in your steering because it has to slide back and forth. So what we got to do is we take off this power valve and we put an adapter on here and create a manual steering center link so that you have no slop at the attachment between the idler arm and this pin right here, and that way your steering is real tight. Otherwise, you almost defeat the purpose of putting all of this fancy steering on because you want it nice and tight and handle good. So I wanted to point that out to you guys. Stand by. And once you got your pitman arm installed and you've got your adapter screwed onto your center link, now remember, you don't need this adapter if you have manual steering already, because you won't have that power valve that's got all that slop in it. So this is what it looks like when it's finished and installed. So essentially the steering is done, except for the steering wheel. When that comes in, I'll show you the procedure on that. Okay, you can see the splines down here where the old steering wheel was. It's really just a matter of undoing a clamp that's right here. There's two bolts underneath the dash that holds the steering column in its place. You want to take the steering wheel off before you take the steering column out and slide it completely out of the dash, and you'll be ready to take a few parts off it. You're going to end up needing this piece right here for your new column and our horse collar right here for your new column. So stand by for that. All right, you guys, here is the steering column layout. First of all, you've got your column. This comes from Flaming River. It's set on a GM design wiring harness. You're going to cut all of this off and put bullet connectors on so they can plug into the wiring harness on your T-Bird. Comes with a wiring diagram that you can trace to get your turn signals and all that stuff to work. Comes with the turn signal lever and the tilt lever. You've got your this is your center connector where you got your U-joints on both sides. This is what the pack looks like from Flaming River. You only need 4.5 inches of this stock to connect the two U-joints together. So we'll use a piece that I had from another previous job. This is that bearing assembly that's going to go against the firewall, and you're going to use your original horse collar and grommet, firewall grommet, along with this keeper right here, this fastener that goes and holds everything to your dash. So that's the component set right there. I'm going to show you what it looks like when it's installed. Okay, one of the parts you're going to have to fabricate on your steering setup is this piece right here. This actually mounts into the firewall and allows the forward support on the steering column for the bearing to anchor right there. What I do is I take a flat piece of 20 gauge steel, I bend it to the proper angle, proper shape, weld them together. I weld nuts to this piece here, and when you're done welding these three pieces together, you end up with this piece. Okay, we've got our Borgeson box mounted in place. You can see the splines right here is where our new Flaming River tilt column is going to attach to. But now we're going to work on getting the power steering pump located in this area here. And you'll notice also that the fuel pump is off because since this car is getting sniper fuel injection, we're not going to need that baby anymore. So there's going to be a block off plate right there. And the fuel pump will be in the back of the car. Okay, so now we're down underneath the dash. And this is where our plate comes into play, this plate right here. Behind the firewall insulation, you might know that there is a plate that it's really just kind of a barrier between the engine compartment and the passenger compartment. That original plate's got to come out. This plate goes in because now, as you can see, it's got the threaded holes that are going to hold the support where our column goes through. So you got to pull your firewall insulation back by taking out these, the little green pins that hold your insulation in. This one I've already got almost taken out. And lift your firewall insulation up, remove the plate that's from behind there, and reinstall this one. And I'll show you what it looks like when that's done. Okay, so we got the steering column mounted up, horse collars attached in. You can see how that plate lays against the back firewall area, and then of course your wiring harness is now hanging down and will eventually be plugged back up into that junction block right there so that you can get your turn signals and your horn set up. Now the horn's kind of tricky because you can see the canceling cam that they give you is different than Ford's setup, and I'll have to show you that process, and that's probably the toughest part of the whole job. Okay, so now we come to the point where it's time to install the steering wheel. You're going to get one of these with your kit. This is a canceling cam that goes onto your steering column. This is the horn button, because the back of the canceling cam has got a contact that contacts that little dooba right there, and that's what makes your horn blow. Now this wire has got to go through your steering wheel. This is your T-Bird steering wheel. But there's no hole in the steering wheel for this stem to go through. So what's got to happen is this steering wheel has to be drilled in such a way so that you can get the stem through and ultimately tie this wire to the insulated part of your horn ring. It's a tedious operation, and that's what has to happen next. All right, so here's what we do to prepare for drilling the steering wheel, because you got to drill a hole through this entire hub. It's about 1 inch thick at right about 10 o'clock. And the hole's got to be in the right spot, or the stem is not going to be in line with the hole and in line with the steering shaft itself. So what I've got is my little mock-up right here, where what I do is I put a dab of paint on this stem right here that I'd shaved down, and I stick it in there, and I orient that so that it's right in the right spot, and I push it down, and when I come back up, it leaves a circle of exactly where I need to drill my hole. And I'll show you what that looks like after I do it, because I can't do it and hold the camera at the same time. Okay, so now you can see where the paint that was on this little tip left a mark right where I need to drill. And so I know that hole is going to be in the right spot, because it's going to go right in there, and it's going to be like a little stamp, and it's going to leave the mark where it needs to be. So I decided to center punch this, drill it all the way through, and then we'll be ready to run our wire through. And that's also a ton of fun. Wait and see. Okay, so for the drilling procedure, what I do, I have an old steering column shaft that I use and stick it in the vise. I've got my hole center punched, and I bust out the drill bits. Got to drill a hole about 5/16 all the way through. Okay, now we got our steering wheel drilled, and you can see, yeah, you really eventually end up with about a 3/4 inch hole. Now what has to happen is this piece right here, this is your horn contact and the canceling cam that's going to slide on from the backside. But what I got to do is check the alignment like this. So when you slide that down into the hole, you see now that your shaft is aligned and that stem goes in the hole. It'll come in from the backside with a wire that comes out of here that will go to your insulated side of your horn ring. So the next thing we got to do is cut a little channel right here for the wire to lay in, because ultimately there's a spring that's going to lay like this. And when that wire comes out of this hole right here, it'll have a tendency over time to ground right there, because it's being compressed by the spring. So you got to take your little die grinder, a tool like this, nice little point on it, get in there and cut a channel. I'll show you what that looks like when it's done, deep enough for your wire to lay in. Stand by. Okay, So here's what we did. You can see that little groove that I cut. This is just a mock-up, but your wire is going to come through this hole and it's going to lay in that groove because this spring is going to be on top of it when it's compressed with your horn ring. And that way it doesn't have the tendency to want to short while you're going down the road and all of a sudden your horn goes off and won't stop. So that's kind of an important thing that takes 5 minutes, but you need to do it. Okay, there's several other steps to go, so hang in there. All right, when you get your kit, you're gonna get this wire with this little duba on the end of it, this spring, and it's gonna go through this little shield right here, which ultimately is going to go into your canceling cam. What we do is we crimp on a little bullet connector. We put a smaller spring on there because the stem is really long and you need a longer wire than the one they give you to reach your horn ring. Once you snap that together, you make sure you got good contact inside, and this will come up through your steering wheel and you can cut it to the right length. All right? All right, so now we're back in the car. Obviously this is the steering shaft. So your canceling cam will go on, and you know, the orientation is at about 10 or 11 o'clock because that's where it needs to be in order to cancel your turn signal switch. So that's why the hole is drilled where it's at. If it was over here, it wouldn't cancel properly. So you got to be right about 10 o'clock is a good position. Now, what we're going to do is we'll feed this wire through the steering wheel, the hole that we drilled, and we'll pick it up from there. Okay, our steering wheel is now on. This wire is, when this wire is grounded, obviously your horn's going to go off. So this wire is going to end up going to the insulated part of your horn ring. And it's another real fun little adventure. But we're getting close. Okay, so this is the horn ring that comes with your steering wheel. And this centerpiece right in here is the insulated part. You can see how there's two layers and they've got insulators on between them. So the trick is to connect that wire to this piece right here. And you can see there's nothing to connect it to. So what I do is I drill a hole and I put a number 10 machine screw with a nut on the back side, and then I weld that nut in place, and then I put an eyelet on the end of the wire and then screw the wire to the horn ring, and you got good contact. And I'll show you how that process goes. Okay, this is that centerpiece of the horn ring. Now I've drilled a hole in it. I told you a number 10 machine screw. It's a number 6 I use. The smaller the better. The reason why the screw is in there is just to hold the nut in place while I tack weld it on the back of this thing. And then you can screw the screw out, cut it to the shortest length that you can get away with, because you don't want that stem sticking through and grounding the whole thing out, which would defeat the purpose of doing this. So now we're going to do a quick spot weld. Okay, so we've got our little nut welded to the back side of our little insulated plate. So now we've got them threads to screw the screw into and to hold the wire. And now we're getting really close. Okay, we got our wire coming through the hub. We've got our eyelet put on there with some heat shrink. Now, this is the spring that comes with your steering wheel. I wrap mine in tape. The whole idea is to not get a ground somewhere that you don't want it. Because this ultimately, the spring is going to slide on over here. And that's why you cut that little groove right there. So the spring has got something to lay into when you put your spring on. And then this will come up and connect to your horn ring where those screws at. Now that screw has been cut very short. It's right here. That screw's probably got maybe 5 threads on it, because if it goes too deep through that plate, it'll ground on the other side of the horn ring. So you just want it to get through the nut and hold the wire. Call it a day. Let's see if we can get this done. Okay, this is it before you put your horn ring on. The spring is in, the wire's through, and it's hooked to the insulated part of the horn ring. And once you snap your horn ring in, connect your battery and cross your fingers. All right, so here's the end result. Yay. When you get it on the first try, it kind of makes your day. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know it's kind of long. It's a heck of a procedure. It's a lot of fun to do. Good luck if you give it a shot. See ya.